صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك المعصومين المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله الحسين. يا غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، ما خاب والله من تمسك بكم، وأمنا من لجأ إليكم سادتي. فيا ليتنا ثم يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. غريب كربلاء، غريب كربلاء، مظلوم كربلاء، مظلوم كربلاء، شهيد كربلاء، شهيد كربلاء. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى الذين بذلوا وهجهم دون الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوات. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran in the chapter of Fussilat, chapter 41, verse 53, He says, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِ بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, we will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it is made apparent to them that He, Allah Almighty, is the truth. Is it not sufficient for them that Allah bears testimony and sees all things? صدق الله العلي العظيم. آمنا بالله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The topic of our lecture is coincidence, chaos theory, and evolution. This lecture will attempt to cover a few topics in one, inshallah. Now, in addressing such topics, it's important for us to establish a kind of a way to be able to delve into each topic in a manner that will allow us to understand it, and understand it both simply in its intricacies and complexities, but also in a manner that is well organized, right? That way we can organize our thoughts so that when we want to speak to others, that we're able to relay what we will learn here inshallah today once we leave bi'idhnihi ta'ala. Now, the issue of coincidence and chaos theory and evolution are things that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Especially those who say that there is no God, atheists, right? they use the whole idea of evolution and chaos theory against those who are creationists, they call them. Those who believe that this world has a creator. Now, we find with the advent of atheism and also the increase in the number of agnostics that currently exist today, and they are increasing in number. There are even those who aren't just non-Muslims. There are some who are Muslims who actually also believe in certain concepts that we will mention today. And it's therefore important for us to be able to deal with real-world issues that are practical to our everyday lives, especially since we do live in a Western society, right? Not that these ideas don't exist back home, by the way. They do, okay? So, to start, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with a rational discourse, right? That way we establish a reference point and we can all agree on certain issues, inshallah, after that. Then we'll take a look at coincidence and chaos theory. And then after that, inshallah, we'll finish off with evolution. So you will find that our discourse is mainly logical and rational and intellectual today, right? There will not be the use of that many verses of the Holy Quran, okay? Inshallah, in the upcoming lectures, we'll be able to deal with other topics that are also pertinent to our lives here in the West. Now, in terms of the rational discourse, it's important for us first and foremost, as I said, to establish a reference point, right? And that reference point starts with us looking deep within ourselves. And when we look deep within ourselves, what do we find? We find that we are in need and that we are limited, right? We are in need of food, we are in need of shelter. We are limited by brain capacity, we are limited by our strength, we are limited by land masses and bodies of water, right? We're limited. We need to be happy. We don't want to be sorrowful, right? We need to go at the very least to the bathroom and relieve ourselves, right? We know we're limited. Everybody knows that they're limited. When we look beyond ourselves to those who created us, our parents, we find that they have the same limitations as we do. As great as our parents are, they're also limited. Their parents are limited also, and all of humanity is limited, right? So we look beyond humanity, we look towards things that are outside of humanity. We look towards the environment. We find that land masses are limited by bodies of water and bodies of water by land masses. We find that the earth is limited by its atmosphere. Planets are limited by their orbits. We find that the universe, according to one theory, is expanding, and according to another theory, is contracting. The fact that we believe that the universe is either expanding or contracting, right, means that it has a limitation, has a limit for it to expand and contract from. So based on that, then, we know that everything in this world is limited. And it's not a far stretch, right, to believe that, because we know that everything in this world, we see it in front of us, has a beginning and an end. Whether it's a plant coming from a seed, right, and then turning into a tree and then seeing it die before us, right, or whether it's something as simple as, you know, a baby being born and an older person dying, right? So we know that everything in this world is limited. The question is, who created this world of limitation? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at things that are created and their creators. So I look, for example, since we have many engineers here, I'll use the example of an engineer, right? An engineer can create, we said, a road, design a road, right? But he's not limited by that road that he designs or that tunnel that he designs. He can design many other roads and many other tunnels, right? We know, for example, for those of the brothers, not the sisters, the brothers that like to cook, right? You can create 1 meal and 2 meals and 3 meals. You're not limited by the meals that you can create, right? We know then also that for those who like to paint, you're not limited by your painting. You can paint 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 paintings, right? So we can safely say, based on that, an overall concept or premise that we can take from that is that a creator is not limited by his creation. Do we agree? Very good. So then, based on that, then, we can apply this to the world of limitation, right? This world of limitation, its creator, the world of limitation, beyond which there is no other limitation. Everything limited we're talking about here. Everything, right? based on applying this universal concept that the Creator is not limited by His creation, then the Creator of all things limited, beyond whom there is no other Creator, is going to be what? Limited or unlimited? Unlimited. So, for those who have taken philosophy, right, we know that we can't go back and say, oh, it's got to be, my parents created me and their parents created them and their parents created them and back and back and back and back and back ad infinitum, because we know that an argument is series is false, right? And we know that a circular argument is also false for those who have taken philosophy, okay? Now, based on this, now that we've proven that the Creator Himself is unlimited, unlimited means that He has no beginning and no end, right? Make sense? Good. Unlimited also means that He is flawless, right? He has no flaws, right? So that means He's all perfect, correct? Brother Amir Raza, He's all perfect. So based on that then, He's all purposeful. And so when He does something, He does it with a purpose, right? And He's all knowledgeable. And He's all just, right? Now He's all knowledgeable because He knows what to create, when to create it, how to sustain it, when to give it life, when to take its life. He's all wise. And He's all purposeful. And everything that He creates has value. Why? Because when the perfect creates something, it has to be for a reason, for a purpose, which means that it has value. Right? We all agree so far? Yes? Very good. Now that we've established the space, it's important for us to understand also something else. And that's that in order for something to be organized, like for example, in order for your, Brother Muhammad, in order for your office to be organized, who organizes it? Yourself, right? Hajj Mustafa, in order for your home to be organized, who organizes it? MashaAllah, you do. Right? Very good. Brother Amir Raza, who organizes your car? You do. MashaAllah. So, who organizes, you would say, brother, I don't know your name. What is your name? Brother Mehran. Who organizes a school? Sure. Could be the board, could be the dean. But someone organizes the school, right? Whether it cleans the school and organizes it like a janitor, or whether he places a curriculum like a school board, or a dean, or a chancellor, or a counselor, whatever you want to call him, right? Someone has to organize something in order for it to be organized, right? We agree? Right? Now, we believe that empirically speaking, there are things that we can point out in this world that we know are organized. For example, if I cut an orange in half and I look at it, does it look organized to you? Brother Muhammad, if I cut an orange in half and you look at it, does it look organized? Yes. If I look at a flower, a daisy, from the top down, Brother Mehdi, does it look organized to you? Yes, it does, right? If I look at, for example, cells under a microscope, plant cells, I'm going to find them beautifully organized like bricks, right? Each with a nucleus, each with cellular fluid, each with a cell wall, right? So we would say that looks organized to us, right? Okay, the planets orbiting around the sun, does that look organized to you, Brother Mehran? Yes, right? So based on these examples, we can say that the world, based on these empirical examples, is organized. And we said that in order for something to be organized, it needs a creator of its organization, right? We agreed, right? So if the world is organized based on these examples, and everything that is organized has a creator of its organization, then that means that the world has a creator of its organization. So we agree, not only does the world have a creator of its organization, and that the system, based on the examples that we took, looks organized, right? But also that that creator is unlimited and all perfect and knows all and is all purposeful because he's all perfect. Very good? Okay. So now based on this, you're going to ask me some questions. You're going to say, Sheikh, now what about earthquakes? What about cancer? What about tornadoes? What about hurricanes? We'll get there. So in the second part of our lecture, which we have reached, we want to look at these issues. And these issues are well rooted in something called chaos theory, right? Everybody knows what chaos theory is. The engineers, of course, know chaos theory, right? Entropy. Everything goes to entropy, right? To disorganization. This is the theory, right? And one of the reasons why this theory was actually developed is because particles were actually observed within a beaker, and they found something that they called Brownian motion. They found that the motion of the particles looked random, okay? But when they ran an electrical current through it, they found that these particles actually moved in accordance with the current. They became organized, right? So they said, well, you know what? Based on that, then, everything is random and goes to chaos until you organize it. And so, of course, we have the first rule of thermodynamics and the second and the third and so forth. Our point is not there. Our point is that we proved logically that in order for something to be organized, it needs an organizer, right? That example of Brownian motion in the beaker basically states that things are disorganized, and when I run a current through it in the chemistry lab, then I make it organized. Very good. But it's based on a false premise. And the false premise is that those particles initially were actually disorganized. Very good? Okay. I want to deal with this false premise, and I want to mention a scientist called Benoit Mandelbrot. I mentioned him to some of the brothers last week. Benoit Mandelbrot has 15 PhDs. He held the chair of Einstein for quite a few years. He is a Nobel Prize laureate. He is a physicist and a mathematician. Okay? Very well respected in his community of physicists and mathematicians. And he died about 3 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago. Now, he had a project where he wanted to actually discover how is it that he was going to calculate accurately the perimeter of the UK itself, of a landmass, let's say, any landmass, right? Because you know that the perimeter of any landmass isn't a straight line or an exact curve, right? So it has a lot of kind of organic forms in it, right? Depressions here and there. Now, being the scientist that he is, he knows of atomic structure, and he knows about, gases and liquids, and he knew that in his mind, he knew that it couldn't be that these shapes that are created, that look to us to be disorganized and random, that they're random. It has to be that particles are being taken away, right? And particles are being replaced. So within a particle system, there has to be some form of organization, right? So he worked on trying to figure out, is there a system of organization based on his theory? And if there is there an algorithm with which he can define this system of organization? And he actually was able to discover an algorithm that he developed that actually proves that what we see as being disorganized is actually a supreme form of organization that is based on what is called a fractal, what he called a fractal. And a fractal is just an instance of something, a small instance of something. Think of it as, for example, a small triangle or a form of a paisley shape, for example, but one instance of it, right? So based on his algorithm, he found that this one instance, when repeated over and over and over again, creates these shapes that we see. And this form of mathematics that he developed would end up being called fractal mathematics. Those who are mathematicians amongst us are probably familiar with Benoit Mandelbrot and his work on fractal mathematics. And his contention that this can't be disorganized was actually proven by him to be a supreme form of organization. Very good. So mathematically this was proven. Now let's simplify things for us, for ourselves and for our minds a little, right? And I want to mention to you a story of a professor who had to give a lecture in Sydney, Australia, okay? So his colleagues were waiting for him. He had to give the keynote speech. And so what he did that day was he decided to walk. So they waited and waited and waited for him. 3 hours they waited until he shows up. When he shows up, they say, MashaAllah, where have you been? Right? We've been waiting for you. Right? 3 hours? He said, you see, today I decided to walk, not take the car or take the bus. And as I walked towards the conference center, I reached the side of a river. So I sat at the riverbank and I waited and waited and waited. He said, as I waited, I thought to myself, well, it's fine for me to wait because I want to cross this river, and the best way for me to cross the river, since there are no rafts around me, is to wait for small twigs in the river to come together and coincidentally create a raft. So it only took 3 hours. I got on the raft and I crossed, and here I am. They all laughed at him and they ridiculed him. He said, why do you laugh and ridicule me? He said to them, they said to him, you want us to believe that a raft came out of small twigs by coincidence in that time that you were sitting and waiting? That's impossible, right? He said, well, isn't that interesting? You find it hard to believe that a few small twigs will come together to create a raft coincidentally, but you contend that this entire universe, in all of its intricate details, in all of the DNA, all of the RNA, all of the land masses, everything within this world, the stars, the galaxies, the atoms, all came together out of coincidence to create this universe. But you won't even believe that a small raft would come together out of coincidence. Who should be ridiculed? You or me? Very simple story, but it does hit home, right? Now I want to share with you a third way to prove that there is no coincidence and chaos. Okay? And this is a mathematical proof. How many people? We have many engineers, so those who don't have, a calculator on them probably have a phone, right? And I know engineers usually carry their calculators in their pockets, right? Why are you laughing? No? Okay. So your calculators are on your phones. So pull out your calculators. Now in this example, we take one person who is blindfolded, and we take a manuscript that has 100 sheets in it, 100 pages. Okay, Brother Manor? 100 pages. And what we do is we shuffle those pages. Okay, Brother Amiraza? We shuffle them. Good? Now what we do is we ask the blindfolded person to pick page 1 out of the 100 pages. What's the probability of them picking page 1 out of the 100? 1 over 100. Very good. 1 over 100 as a decimal is what? 0.01. Ahsantum. Very good. Do you have your phones out with the calculators or no? I wasn't joking, by the way. Right? Okay, good. So now what we're going to do is ask that very same blindfolded person and say to them, we want you to pick page 2. Out of the 100 pages, what's the probability of him or her picking page 2? First we have the 1 over 100 multiplied by 1 over 99, right? Right? For those mathematicians of you. Yeah? Okay. Who's got a calculator? What's 1 over 100 times 1 over 99? Wait, I thought we had engineers here. What's going on? 0.0099. Okay. Now we ask them to pick page 3. Okay? That's 1 over 100 multiplied by 1 over 99 multiplied by 1 over 98. How much is that? 0.00009. Whatever. Okay. Now we ask them to pick page 4. 1 over 100 times 1 over 99 times 1 over 98 times 1 over 97 is how much? 0.0000941. Okay. Now we ask for page number 5. Huh, Agha? He's looking at me. Haji Hassan is looking at me and saying, come on, really? You really wanted me to do this math? Now, for those of us who have taken math and are good at it, this number that we just calculated, as we're going along, right? Does it prove to us that it is mathematically possible to choose these pages? Or does it prove that the possibility approaches 0 so much that it's impossible? Exactly, and that's exactly what Einstein said. So coincidence? Mathematical impossibility. You see? Clear? صلوا على محمد وعلى. So now you say to me, but Sheikhna, what about then earthquakes and what about tornadoes and all this sort of stuff? Say, we said that this system, we all agreed, this system is an organized system, right? Based on the examples that we took. And we said that the Creator is unlimited and all perfect, right? And since the Creator is unlimited and all perfect and all knowing, right? Then the system that He created is organized. And therefore everything that we see within the system as it occurs is a manifestation of the organization that He created. Now imagine, if you will, if an earthquake did not occur in Quetta, for example, or did not occur in Iran, and that pressure stayed exactly like a pressure cooker. If you don't relieve a pressure off a pressure cooker, what happens? It turns into what? Yeah. And it'll end up exploding, right? So within this system that's constantly changing, there's going to be a buildup of pressure. If pressure is not relieved in one area of the earth, what's going to happen to larger areas, if not the whole earth? A much greater disaster, right? Now we know of the presence of tectonic plates, and we know that the movements of the tectonic plates is exactly what causes the earthquakes, right? So we know it's part of the organized system. And we know that when it comes to tornadoes, this has to do with the movement of the winds, and those who understand anything about weather, right, will tell you that this is a direct effect of what? Of either the water levels, right, or the air pressure, correct? All still part of an organized, scientifically metered and measured system. Now, if we can't measure something scientifically, it's not because it's not measurable. It's because we don't have the technology and the tools to measure it yet. Or our technology hasn't reached that level yet. Make sense? Now you say, Sheikh, now what about cancer? There are people who get cancer. There are people who die senselessly in these areas in earthquakes. We say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created the earthquake in that part of the earth where there are people who are living, He who determined for them to live at a certain point has determined for them to die at that point in that place. And if, as we proved, Allah is unlimited, which means He's all perfect, which means He's all wise and all fair, that means that that is the best form of justice, because Allah is the one that chose for them to die in that area of the world. And so it becomes fair. It becomes Allah's choice. Now you say to me, Sheikhna, well, what about, what about people who take their own lives? This has to do with another lecture on predestination and free will. So hang tight and we can deal with this issue in upcoming lectures. Okay? But so far we've proven there is no chaos, there is no coincidence, right? And now what we want to move on to is the theory of evolution. So far so good. Can I move on? Yes? Okay. And before I move on, cancer is the same thing, by the way. You're either afflicted by cancer because of environmental reasons, because of where you choose to live, okay? Or it's inherited. And if it's inherited, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it that way as part of the system for that person to die this way. Or for it to be that person's trial and tribulation in his life. And that would be a way for that person to do what? To show their gratitude to their Creator in accordance with how they negotiate that test and that trial, right? How they work through it. Will they forget their Creator and be unthankful, or will they remember their Creator and take on the challenge, right? Because remember, we said ultimately that the greatest right the Creator has upon us is to show Him gratitude. The same right that our parents have upon us because they brought us to this world. When we say, I wish my parents would see me now. Oh mom, oh dad, please be pleased with me, right? All we want is to please them. Why? Because they created us. Same thing applies to Allah, but to the upteenth level, to the highest level. Why? Because He gave everything. He brought everything to this world. He created everything. And therefore He has the most ultimate right upon me, right? So now, if someone is affected by environmental issues causing them cancer, that's a result of someone else's choice. Someone didn't regulate the issue of cancerous materials, and as a result, we ended up being exposed. This does not mean that Allah is unfair. It means a human being was unfair and made an unfair choice that affected us for their bottom line, which is their pocket, right? This has nothing to do with Allah. This has to do with the issue of predestination and free will. And we'll deal with that in another lecture. Evolution. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, evolution, we know, has been sold to us as though it's a point of fact, right? Whether it's in the media or in our schools or in universities, right? And many of us, we don't really understand evolution that well, except that what we know is what's called macroevolution. But you see, evolution is of two types: microevolution and macroevolution. Microevolution is the theory of natural selection, which we see on the National Geographic and on the Discovery Channel, where we see that the fittest, right, survive, right, in this world. So we find in the animal kingdom, for example, that only the strongest cheetah is able to survive, right? Only the strongest gazelles are able to survive, right? This is the theory of natural selection. We have no problem with it. We agree with it. Islam agrees with it. The rational mind agrees with it. Then you have macroevolution. Macroevolution is the theory that man came from apes. Okay? So, of course, this theory was developed by a man named Charles Darwin. And it's suggested that in his work, which was published, I believe, in 1852 or 1859, I can't remember, but one of those two dates, that he, in his book, The Origin of the Species, suggested this. And this was based on trips that he made around the world, and specifically when he got to the Galapagos Islands, and he noticed the migration of sparrows. That's one thing that he noticed. And he noticed from island to island that there were certain similarities between the sparrows that he saw, right? And also he noticed something else. He noticed that when a bear would actually go towards catching a fish and eating it, it was similar to how he saw a whale actually lunging towards a fish and eating it also. So he figured there's got to be some connection there, except his theory was reverse to what is suggested today. His theory was that it was the other way, from land to water. The current theory is from water to land. Okay? The movement of evolution from water to land. That's what's suggested today, right? So, now that we know this, it also serves us to understand a little bit of history about Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin actually wasn't a scientist. His father was a physician. He wanted him to be a physician, but he didn't want to be a doctor. Okay? So instead, he was more interested in botany. He liked to go around and actually draw and make catalogs of plants. This was such an extensive catalog that he made that the National Botanical Society of England suggested to him that he should travel the world, right, on his own expense. His father would actually fund his trip so that he would document more plants from around the world. With him was a man also who was a specialist in maps and map drawing, and so he went with him on the trip. And on the trip, he observed what we mentioned, right? Later on in his life, he would actually suggest before his death this whole issue of evolution, even though it wasn't something that was believed by scientists at the time, but it was something that he suggested. As time went by, right, certain scientists, specifically anthropologists, adopted this theory, okay? And it is still a theory. The problem with the theory that man came from apes is that they're still unable to find something that is called the missing link. At one point, they found a small part of a mandible or a jaw, right? And based on this jaw, they determined this is the missing link, and they called her Lucy. And then they started forming, you know, this human or humanoid that was between a human and an ape, and suggested that Lucy was the missing link. Then after a while they discovered more parts of her, and they found no, this was not her. This was actually a miniature ape that actually looked more human. At one point they also looked at Neanderthals, those with very thick brow ridges. They were very big in shape. They determined they were different than humans and different than apes, a different species. Later on, they would determine that they were humans, but they suffered from a condition called giganticism. Okay? Now, even though at one point they believed that the Neanderthals, right, that coexisted during the time of humans were different species, different than the humans, the Homo sapiens, after a while, only a few years ago, they conceded and said, no, they are actually humans, but they suffer from this condition. This condition, by the way, still exists today, right? Those who used to watch wrestling in the 80s and 90s know of a man called Andre the Giant, right? Andre the Giant suffered from giganticism. Those that you find in the Guinness Book of Records who tend to be the tallest people in the world, right? They suffer from giganticism because they have an over secretion of a hormone called growth hormone. Okay? So now we don't have Lucy. Lucy's out the door. Now they came up with someone called Alex, right? A new sort of hominid, right? And they then discover, no, this was another small ape. So this is what we say to them. We say, look, نحن أصحاب الدليل نميل معه أينما يميل. We are the people of evidence and proof. Bring us the proof, then we'll have the discussion. So far, there is no proof. Let me explain to you a little about anthropologists. And this was a show that I actually saw on National Geographic, and I saw another report on the same anthropologists on the Discovery Channel. This man had discovered a new sort of canine, okay, in the area that we know as New Zealand today, okay? And he found basically the head of this animal. So he scans the head, and then what he would do is he would make up what his vertebrae would actually look like, meaning his backbones, and then what his front legs would look like, and what his back legs would look like, and even the length of his tail based on the size of his head. Okay, based on the size of his head. He did this all using CGI, using animation, right? He had an animator who has a program such as Maya or Kinetics 3D or Cinema 4D. And what he did was he told him, this is the scanned head. Now I want you to create the vertebra this way. And I want the legs, the hind legs need to be very robust and heavy because they have to take on a heavy head. He said to him, well, how long should the tail be? He said, well, you know what? Make it a short tail. I see him as having a short tail, not a long tail. Okay? Then he said to him, okay, what about the fur? He said, long, short. He said, make it short, make it short. He said, okay, what about the color, the coloration? He said, give him some stripes. So how did he get all of that from a skull? How do you get the color of the stripes? How do you get the color of the skin? How do you get the length of the tail? This is so unscientific of a scientist to do. It is also unscientific for someone to accept a theory and say that it is point of fact when it is just a theory that hasn't been proven yet. It is extremely unscientific, right? So why is it that they sell us this theory? The reason why they sell us this theory is because the media wants to sell you this theory. If you go into the halls of academia, you'll find that most scientists, that are at that level don't adhere to this theory. They say it's still just a theory. Instead, you'll find cosmologists, they refer you back not to the issue of the hominid, the missing link, and that this theory that humans came from apes. Not at all. They refer you more to something called the boson particle. They're more concerned with the beginning of time, these cosmologists. They say, look, everything came from a beginning. And that beginning, they discovered, was a particle that they named the boson particle. Okay? They said that this particle reacted with another boson particle, which they call the God particle. And then the world was created. There was a reaction. So I'm going to ask you this question. If I put a test tube of hydrogen and a test tube of oxygen together, will they create water? Will they? No. What's your name, brother? Brother Ali. Will they? No. What do you need in order for water to be created, Brother Ali? Do you know? What do I need? I need a spark. Right? I need a spark. There has to be a spark. Now, I need to, or my lab partner, Ali, needs to create a spark at the base of these two test tubes that I'm holding upside down. And then what will happen? There'll be a pop, a miniature explosion, and then water will come out. Right? But what needs to happen? Someone has to initiate the reaction. So in their books, whether it's Hawkins or Dawkins or whomever they may be, right? None of them say that they know the reason for the reaction. Instead, they say, we don't know. It could have been that something caused the reaction. It might not have been. They don't actually claim. So why is it that on TV, in the media, they tell us that the world came out of coincidence, when these very scientists don't say that the world came out of coincidence? Right? We say this. Whether it's macroevolution, where they say to us, humans came from apes, we say to them, prove it. Right? Until you bring us the missing link, we're going to stick to our story. Fair enough? That's the most scientific answer we can give them, right? Right? That's number one. Number two, when they come to us and say, well, the world came from the Big Bang, we say, we believe that the world came from a Big Bang. Why? Because we believe that in this world of limitation, everything is limited, which means it has a beginning and an end. So this world had to have a beginning, right? We believe it rationally. We also believe it because also the Quran mentions it, right? It says that the earth was what? Was ratqan fafataqnahuma. Allah says, He says, this is the only part of the verse I'll give you, okay? He says that it was just what? A particle, and then we broke it apart and created an explosion. And then water would come out of it. Just like the reaction of hydrogen and oxygen. But the main thing here is what? Is not to have a theological argument, but to have a rational discourse and intellectual argument, right? Because our brothers and sisters in humanity here, they don't believe in the Holy Quran. So we have to know how to reason and rationalize with them and give them a logical discourse, right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. So now we were able to not only prove the existence of God, to prove that He's unlimited and He's all perfect, to prove that the world has a creator, to prove that there is no coincidence and chaos, to prove also that evolution, not natural selection, not microevolution, we agree with that, but macroevolution is flawed so far. It's still a theory, it hasn't been proven, and that we believe in Big Bang, right? We just say that in order for a reaction to occur, it needs someone to initiate the reaction, right? We contend that that's the unlimited creator. They contend that they don't know. We proved it rationally. They want to prove it empirically. We believe that using empirical examples that we did, as we did, that rationally there is a necessity for there to be someone to initiate the reaction, period. And that's the unlimited creator Himself. And no one knew this better in this rational argument than Amir al-Mu'mineen and Ahl al-Bayt. That's why Amir al-Mu'mineen says in that very first sermon in Nahj al-Balagha, he says, أول الدين معرفته, in the second paragraph. The first of religion is to know him. Right? وكمال معرفته التصديق به. And the best way to know him is to prove his existence. We did that today. وكمال التصديق به. And the best way to prove his existence is what? He says توحيده, is to prove that he is unique, that he is unlimited. That's tawheed. We say, well, what is the best way to do tawheed? He says, وَكَمَالُ تَوْحِيدِهِ الْإِخْلَاصُ لَهُ. Says the best way to do tawheed, to prove that Allah is unique, that there is no other like him, is to do what? Is to be sincere to him. Right? Not to ascribe a partner to him. Then what does he say? He says, لِشَهَادَةِ كُلِّ صِفَةٍ أَنَّهَا غَيْرُ الْمَوْصُوفِ. He says, because look, if you characterize Allah with attributes, know that Allah isn't these attributes, right? Because attributes, characteristics, are greater than what they describe, and the described is greater than the attribute. لشهادة كل صفة أنها غير الموصوف وشهادة كل موصوف أنه غير الصفة. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, right? فمن وصف الله سبحانه, the Imam says. He says, for he who describes Allah, فقد قرنه, then you've compared him with something. If you say something's tall, then you've compared it with something short or something taller, right? Right? He says, ومن قرنه فقد ثناه. He who compares him to something, then he said that there are two of him. Because you've compared, if he's comparable, then there's something that is compared to him. Right? Then he says, ومن ثناه فقد جزأه. He says, he who then has described him, compared him to something, then he's ascribed a partner to him. And he who has ascribed a partner to him has given him parts. وَمَنْ جَزَّأَهُ فَقَدْ جَهِلَهُ. He says, he who gives him parts doesn't know him. Doesn't know him at all, the Imam says. وَمَنْ جَهِلَهُ فَقَدْ. The Imam says, أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ. If you don't know him and you think of him in this way, then you can point to him and say, this is Allah. Like our brothers in Christianity did with Jesus. Right? Our brothers Christians, our brother and sister Christians, they say, there's Jesus, he is God. Say, how can he be God? No, you don't understand. The three are one. Simple math. How can you squeeze three together to be one? Doesn't happen. Right? Say, okay, no, the three are one. There are three parts. This is what he means by jazza'a, that he's made them into parts, into a compound. You say, well, don't you believe that Jesus died on the cross? They say, yes. You say, so at one instance, the part was missing, right? They say, yes. But then he came back. They say. Okay, so you're saying he was missing, which means, do you believe God is all perfect? They'll say yes. Say, well, if he's all perfect, then how can he be missing a part? How can he even have parts if he's perfect? Parts are what? Limitations. Right? So the Imam then says what? After he says, فَقَدْ أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ, he says, وَمَنْ أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ فَقَدْ عَدَّهُ وَمَنْ عَدَّهُ فَقَدْ حَدَّهُ. Says he who can point to him has counted him. And so when we say قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, it's exactly as though we're saying Allah is one. No, Allah is unique. That's what ahad is. Right? Not one in comparison to two. Right? Notice, Allahu la ilaha illahu. There is no God but he. Right? Right? Al-Wahidul Ahad. The one, the unique. One not in terms of number. One in terms of uniqueness because he's unlimited. Right? And then he says, وَمَنْ عَدَّهُ فَقَدْ حَدَّهُ. If you one the unique, you've limited. One not in terms of number. One in terms Allah of Allah is unlimited. He's rationally, right? And then he says, وَمَنْ عَدَّهُ. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. So let's go back to Medina now. After the women and children and the caravan arrives to Medina, we said they camped outside for a while until Bishr, the poet of Ahl al-Bayt, would go in, reach the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, and announce to everyone that the caravan had returned from Karbala. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam and Sayyidah Zainab were outside waiting. Bishr would go out and announce, and people would start coming out into the streets. Women were crying and screaming. Old men were coming out on their crutches. The sick, such as Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya, was out, standing up and falling, looking for his brother, asking, what happened to the caravan? Al-Baneen was asking about her children, and Bishr would say to her, she'd say, what happened to Imam Hussein? He'd say to her, وَعَزِّيكِ اللَّهِ بِابْنِكِ جَعْفَرَ, I give you my condolences for the passing of your son Ja'far. She'd say, what about my son Hussein? He'd say to her, وَعَزِّيكِ اللَّهِ بِشَهَادَةِ ابْنِكِ Abdullah, I give you my condolences for the martyrdom of your son Abdullah. She'd say, but what about my son Hussein? He'd say to her, عَزِّيكِ اللَّهِ بِابْنِكِ Uthman, I give you my condolences for the death of your son Uthman. She'd say, what about my son Hussein? He'd say to her, أُعَزِّيكِ اللَّهِ بِابْنِكِ الْعَبَّاسِ, I give you my condolences for the martyrdom of your son Al-Abbas. She'd say to him, what about my son Hussein? He'd say to her, أُعَزِّيكِ اللَّهِ بِالْإِمَامِ الْحُسَيْنِ. Al-Baneen, they say, at that point would fall to the ground. She would be holding the son of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas as she fell. They say, brothers and sisters, that there was this little girl, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein salamullahi alayhi. We all know her. She was staying with Salama. Salama, the wife of the Prophet, the one who Imam Hussein gave her the jar of the sand from Karbala that was given to him by Prophet Muhammad. When he told her, when it turns red, know that I was martyred on the land of Karbala. Salama also would come out and ask about Imam Hussein, and in her hand was this jar. And she was taking care of Fatima al-Alila. That Fatima, when Imam Hussein was about to leave Medina, he goes to the house of Salama, and hearing the footsteps of her father, she would run to the door. This young girl, Fatima al-Alila, as soon as the door would open, she would see her father. She would jump on her father and hug him and kiss him. He would put his hand on her head and he would take her back into the house of Salama. He'd put her back in her bed. He'd say to her, dear daughter, I am here to bid you farewell. I must leave you now to go towards Mecca and then towards Kufa. Fatima would get up out of her bed and say to him, dear Father Hussein, take me with you, dear father, she would say. Imam Hussein salamullahi alayhi, it's as though we can see him. He looks at his daughter like we look at our little kids when we leave on a trip. Except this trip, the Imam wouldn't come back from. Imam Hussein salamullahi alayhi, as she held his leg, they say, he would tell Salama, please take this little daughter of mine and take her back into the house. And he would tell Salama about the sand in the jar, and then he would get on his horse. They say Fatima al-Alila would say, Aba Hussein, khudni ma'ak. She would cry and weep and say, dear father Hussein, take me with you wherever you go. Don't leave me alone. This very daughter, Fatima al-Alila, on the day in Medina when Bishr would make the announcement, she would come out running, asking for her father. Aba Hussein, have you returned for me? Aba Hussein, Aina anta ya habibi? Where are you, my beloved father? She looked as Sayyidah Zainab would walk into Medina towards her. as Imam Zayn al-Abidin would walk towards her, as Sukayna would walk towards her. But where was Ruqayya? Where was she, Ruqayya? Ruqayya got to see her father, huh? Ruqayya saw her father. She saw the head of her father, remember? What would have happened to Fatima al-Alila if she had seen her father on the land of Karbala? Sayyidah Zainab, she'd say to her, dear daughter, dear daughter, I give you my condolences for the passing of your father Hussein. They say, brothers and sisters, Fatima al-Alila and all the women would be crying and weeping for nights and days and nights and days after that point. They say, Lady Zainab, there wasn't a chance or a point that she would not be crying. She would be seen in Medina going back and forth, recounting what happened in Karbala. This created such a problem, just like it created in Sham, that Yazid would send to Medina after the Wali of Medina would tell Yazid that this Zainab is creating problems. She won't let people forget about Karbala and what Yazid had done. He would send his troops and he would exile her out of Medina. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough that you killed Aba Abdullah. Now you exile Sayyidah Zainab. Some narrations say Lady Zainab ended up in Egypt. Some narrations say she ended up in Syria, where we know her shrine is today. Lady Zainab, the hero of Karbala, the representative of Sayyidah Fatima, exiled from Medina. Who would be left for the children? هل من منادي ينادي وحسينا ومظلوما وشهيدا غريب كربلاء غريب كربلاء شهيد كربلاء مظلوم كربلاء السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى الذين بذلوا مهجهم دون الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. You know, brothers and sisters, these tears that we shed, they will be intercessors for us on the day of judgment. The Prophet of Allah salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi says that he who sheds one tear for my son Hussein, Allah will give him heaven. We ask Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, that you make Imam al-Hussein and these tears that we shed intercessors for us on the day of judgment. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you and we beseech you that you increase our knowledge, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen, so that our belief in you is one that is not based on blind faith, but faith that is rooted in knowledge, in the light of knowledge, for you are the light of the heavens and the earth. Ya Allah, we ask you and we beseech you that you repay the debts of all those who are in debt, that you give health to all of our sick, and there are many who are sick from our community, from communities around the world. Many who are sick. There's a young brother who has been diagnosed with MS in Toronto. His father asks you to remember his son Ja'far in your dua. My father-in-law is sick. I ask you to remember him in your dua. All of you are sick. The sick of everybody here. Everybody knows someone who is sick. Remember them in your dua. Oh Allah, we ask you and we beseech you that you give health to our sick, that you release our POWs, that you remove oppression from all those who are oppressed around the world, Ya Allah, that you help us take on all of these challenges and trials, and that we become successful in them, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Ya Allah, we ask you and we beseech you that you support all those who volunteered to make these majalis a success, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen, in the past, today, and in the future. All those, Ya Rab, who founded centers such as these for the dhikr of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen, whether they are in their graves or still alive, give them tawfiq, Ya Rabb al-Alameen, fi dunya wal akhirah. Oh Allah, we ask you and we beseech you that you bestow your mercy on our dearly departed and the dearly departed of all of al-mu'mineen and mu'minat, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen, and that you hasten the appearance of al-Imam al-Hujjah, salamullahi alayhi, and you make us stand by him in servitude, just like the companions of al-Imam al-Hussein, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين والفاتحة على أرواح المرحومين. اللهم صل على محمد.